take those reps with the first team offense against the first team defense, how valuable is that, and does your mindset change at all with that?
Yeah, I think you'd like to say that you don't change the circumstances. I try to approach every single day like that, and control what you can, and that's just being, ultimately your best in that moment. And the best competitors I've been around have been the best at being present.
Dillon, you talked at Rookie Minicamp about your process of picking up a new playbook. Is you basically just have to go through it. How do you feel like you've gotten through it so far? It's only been a month or so, but how do you feel like that process has gone so far?
Yeah, I'd say 2 words: just continuous improvement. And in this profession, I think there's a bunch of progression and regression, but just your ability to manage that as fast as possible, I think that allows you to create improvement at a faster pace. So I just been approaching it like that, and eager to learn every single day. Just approach this like a student.
In your college career with 3 different teams, did you do much play action from under center?
Yeah, of course. I think at one point I was the play action king, I guess. We did a lot of play action early on, but
Which spot was that?
UCF. But I think that's just part of it. You'd love to use play action to your advantage, but anyway, in any sense, you got to be present in that moment for that key play and adjust. But definitely have done play action.
What's it like for you to look across what's it like for you to look across and see Myles Garrett over there and know that you've got to operate with someone like that across?
Well, yeah, I think in one play, you definitely see that, in one of the team periods. But, very happy he's on our team. But also, just as a competitor, that's what you look forward to, playing against the best. And, him being able to be out here today, and us compete, that's huge. And getting everyone back together.
Kevin Stefanski was talking about using a line during 7-on-7 to try to help the quarterbacks feel the pocket. Have you ever done a 7-on-7 like that before you came here? And then if so, do you feel there's a benefit?
Yeah, I think, everyone's had their way of doing it. I've had tennis rackets in front with guys walking forward. I've had shoulder pad shields, 9-on-9. I've done kind of the mixture of it all, but, all to find a solution to, one problem. So have done it, but, love that we're doing it here.
It might feel different for you in the NFL, but do you have a time frame where it feels like you're creating a connection with the receiver in your years in college, and have you started to feel that here at this level for you?
Yeah, I think it's just reps, and you try to maximize your reps with guys, but, anytime you can get extra reps as well, that's huge. But trying to balance that out with timing is key and something you need to do. But I think, just from day one to this point, there's continuous improvement for sure.
So when you've had a few weeks out there now with Joe and Kenny also out there, what have you been, how's it been like working with them, I guess, and how have you picked their brains so far?
Yeah, I think just a diverse room, diversity and experience, and you just appreciate those guys, because I think what we've done as a room really well is the inability to dwell on the past. We're just extremely present, and I was just curious, does anyone know how much minutes like Joe has played in the playoffs? Like the guy's played 606 snaps. Like, this guy knows the game and has done it at a high level. So I think there's a lot of juice in the squeeze, but you got to ask the right questions, and that's what I try to approach every single day. Same with Kenny.
Did you research that on your own, that he came up with that he had 606 snaps, or did one of the coaches mention it, or what?
Well, I'm not going to walk into a situation not know what I'm walking into. So, I like to know a little bit about my teammates, and I think just in general, if you approach the game as a student, you learn every single day and you improve every single day. So that's just how I've been.
Do you get
Dillon,
much out of virtual reality?
I think there's a balance to everything. You could ask me the same thing. Do I get much out of film? Do I get much out of walkthroughs? I think for any player, you got to find what works for you. And for me, I've loved the balance of a lot of things. Walkthroughs are key for muscle memory and being able to visualize. I think film helps you get clear pictures defensively, but also, see different looks in a certain concept. And I think virtual reality kind of, goes in that boat as well. So I would say I've used it before. I've used it, as much as I can, but also film, walkthroughs, and just talking ball. So it's kind of a mix of everything.
Dylan, you mentioned like rookie minicamp and OTAs, and now your first day of mandatory minicamp. What has been the biggest challenge for you in all 3 steps since arriving here?
Yeah, I think just being able to adapt as quick as possible. I think that's a challenge for anyone. There's a time within that you have to work through. But I think I go back to being present, and not being able to, dwell on a regression or get too high with a progression, and being just even kill throughout that. So I've been trying to just stay balanced in that way. But every single day there's something to get better at. So just approaching it that way for sure.
Dylan, I apologize.
Yeah, all good.
When you talk about there's always something to get better at, when you're going through the 7-on-7 and 11-on-7, 11-on-11, at this stage, how do you measure success?
You love to stay process driven. I think for a lot of people, it's a results based business. So let's not get that wrong. But you have to have a process behind it to be able to create consistent results. And I think whether it's a microwave mentality or that Amazon lifestyle of wanting it right away, sometimes it's just not the case. So being able to have a process, stick to it, continue to listen to your coaches, and try to get better that way. That's what I want to do. I want to build a solid foundation, so that you're banking on the process, and then allowing that to have consistent results.
Dylan, you mentioned the importance of asking good questions to be able to fully get the most out of Kenny and Joe's experience. What are some of the questions you've asked, and what are their answers in those situations?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it's more so their experiences, whether it's a certain concept or what they've done in the past, just day to day and in a daily routine. But it's also just shooting the shit, and just being the guys, because I think that's when you're able to just connect the most, in an authentic way. And for me, I just ask myself, like, have I been my most authentic self today? And that's through just asking real questions that they got real answers to.
Can you give us an example of just one of those conversations so we could paint the picture?
Yeah, I would just say, when we talk through a certain concept, couldn't give you the name, but if you think conceptually about a play, it could truly, the intent of play could change just based on how you think of it. And we had to play this off season of, maybe if it's manner zone, you play it this way, or you see it this way, but a footwork, your eyes starting somewhere could change the whole play. So appreciate, Joe and Kenny for their perspective on that.
Dylan, it looks like they are heaping a lot on your plate, not only to get you ready to play, but also to kind of figure out what works or what might not work as they're putting this whole new scheme together.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering, how do you find that to be, where you are kind of having to take some of the heat or the brunt of figuring out this offense while you're also learning it?
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? But as a competitor, you walk into that challenge and face it head on. That's what you appreciate about the game too. And I think everyone in this game sees themselves as starters, and that belief of self is why a lot of guys are in the NFL. So you just continue to improve, continue to challenge yourself, and not a lot of people love it, but failure creates growth. Yet we live in a production-based business, so it's hard for people to understand that balance.
Have you ever
Couple
had
more.
a teammate as big as DeJuan Jones?
Say that again?
Have you ever had a teammate as big as DeJuan Jones?
I have. Paul Rubelt, 6'11", tackle. So yeah, I've luckily been able to play with 3 first-round tackles. Seen 6'11" Germany tackles. So DeJuan's just adding to the repertoire of diversity. So I'm appreciative of
What
that.
did that guy, the 6'11" guy, what did he weigh?
Gosh, I couldn't tell you. I wasn't with him when he'd hop on the scale, but I hope a good weight,
How do
So.
you balance trying to stay process-driven with thinking about winning the starting job and maybe evaluating yourself versus the other 3 guys?
Yeah, I think for many people that's tough, and I'll go back to, like, failure creates growth, but we are in a production-based business, so it's hard for people to balance that. And for me, I just continue to stick to the process, and try to create completions, try to be understanding of the situation, but also, I have belief in myself, and everyone at this level does as well. That's why they're here. But for the most part, how can you create value right away today and be the best? And I keep going back to it, but the best competitors are the best at staying present. So my ability to just be right where my feet are, be with you, and be as honest as I can. That's all I can do.
How'd that ball to the corner of the end zone at Jamari's throw feel?
Felt good. I think Jamari's just, a talented individual, but just how smart he is and understanding maybe a man beating play, but to be able to create leverage and win in zone coverage, it allows it, to be a lot easier on my end, and then him making a, outstanding catch. So he's great in the time I've been around him, and look forward to continuing that.
Dillon, you mentioned learning from Kenny and Joe. How involved is Deshaun behind the scenes, and what did you pick up from him thus far?
Great question. He's been a guy I've connected with as well, and he's actually a guy I sit by in, our O-line meetings, even in our, offensive unit meetings. So just being able to be around him and, nudge him and ask a question, whether it's for confirmation or his thought. But also when we're talking through concepts, I think it's super cool that we do have 5 guys in the room that kind of can speak to their own experience. And even Deshaun this morning, talking through a concept and kind of how he sees it in the red area. And, I even go back, it can change the play, in a big way, just how you think of it. So, appreciate him a bunch too, just sharing all his knowledge.
Then what is, you mentioned the phrase Amazon lifestyle like that. What does that mean?
Yeah, Amazon lifestyle is like, and I don't mean Amazon in the jungle. I mean Amazon like Amazon Prime, You get on your phone and you order it, it's there to you right away. Well, and I'm not saying we should wait 7 days, right? But I'm just saying sometimes there's some work, within that, or a microwave, just heating your food up in 30 seconds rather than cutting it up, seeing the process of it. I think throughout that journey, it's a lot more rewardable, and you learn more through that.
When you're not
This is the last one.
When you're not taking reps and you're watching, what are you looking for the most? Like, what are you focusing on?
Yeah, I think you want to take as much mental reps as you can, and you want to work through the footwork and try to play through the progression yourself. But within that too, within a practice, whether it's conversations with, Coach Musgrave or, any quarterback back there, and say, hey, how'd you see this? I think there's a balance of, discussion, but also a mental rep. So I try to manage it that way.